pretty good.
in your age.
But I just found this out, I did,
You got another PD,
yes. Oh, but I didn't.
yeah.
I didn't.
Just so you go down that side of the table.
Yeah, I made some last week, too, not just this.
Yeah, a lot of the parties up in the place in the bar, you gotta have a sponsor before you can even get it. It's courses in college. It's the city or transit or somebody's got a sponsor.
When I was in Virginia, I didn't do it, but I did not have to pay. So here, it's like, it's got college, it's probably costs close to, it's $3 grand, I think. So I don't know what it is now.
I don't know, the EMT was an 8 credit hour college course, plus you got state certified.
It's crazy. See the road? See the road?
Which one?
The one for Parkland, I thought that was over.
I didn't see the road.
The officer.
Yeah, the one that they say.
Scott Svensson,
Right.
Peterson, all,
Not the two.
all over.
5 years ago. Pretty hard, it was, something that happened 5 years ago. I don't know, well, I got it, I don't know.
Yeah, I didn't know that was it's kind of chaotic. You got certain protocols you gotta follow and everything. Understand the protocols.
That's the way you never get in contact. When you have a police officer who's been around, that's police officer, and they've never been in this situation, or a death with them, you know, and we don't know what we use right now, so I find it's hard to, because when it comes on, I mean, we also have, the officer, you know, we see days, but when you take a psychological factor like that, it comes into play, and that psychological factor keeps you over, and you have no control. I don't know where the intent. When it comes into play, I can watch the trial, so I know nothing. I know what people said he did, or this, but I don't know.
I mean, there's a citizen that someone would get upset with us because we go into a scene that's reported as combative. And a combative scene, we got a stage minimum 2 blocks away. So the police department gets there, neutralized.
And we try to be pretty quick.
And a lot of people were just, you know, why didn't you come on? You can't.
The police. I said, you see,
And it made it bad. One time we parked 2.5 blocks away. We figured out they were on a side street. The perpetrator that was armed reported that he was walking by Hope Park. Called up dispatch and said, hey, you know, the perpetrator's walking right by the fire engine on this street heading towards North Norman.
Yeah.
The deputy met him at the corner.
This is the Panama City,
8 coming.
7 or 8, yeah.
Yeah.
But they put out warnings, don't go in the water, people listed from the and it is in fact a consensus, none of them was important. They were all by males in 1962. But none of
No,
them,
one of them was black.
wasn't it?
Yeah.
But they were none of them,
Not the
or
last one, I think it was black.
but that's just the ones that died.
He was there for his birthday party. They said, less than me, water. But they went to step across and he missed, not on him, sweaty.
They didn't even have to in the water. And that's just the people that died.
Yeah, it was on a double red flag.
How many rescues were done? Those just along the way. So, it was a very small percentage. But actually,
Memorial Day or Saturday Day.
Yours?
Yeah,
Right now, when they're saying don't go.
It's needed.
Right now, but that's what's going on. I don't know if that's very involved, that's very done. But yes, I did get great for testing during the state of emergency. No, but she.
This is all I have. No, all I have is this.
Called and asked if I knew about it. I almost said, I just see voters. Arizona started it. I am ready.
All right. Let's begin. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here today. It's Thursday, June 29th, 2023. Time is 4:06. I apologize for my tardiness. But it's good to be here today. This is a budget workshop meeting at this particular moment. So my main function here is to turn it over to the city administrator and to our finance director. So
I'll let Zach take the ceremonies.
what's that?
Ceremonies.
Want to do the ceremony? We can do the ceremony. Let's at least do, let's start with ceremonies. Heavenly Father, thank you for being here with us today. Thank you for blessing this city with so much. We just want to be good stewards of it and help us to do that in an orderly fashion. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Also, suppose I should do a roll call. All the commissioners are present, as well as the administrator, our finance director, chief of police, and deputy city clerk. And now back again to the
city attorney will be here momentarily. Anyway, this is the first of traditionally two budget hearings. The first one is to review Zach's preliminary budget and to give him any input with respect to that. Also to give him some of the major factors that we would be interested in having included. Two of the most significant are salary, cost of living increases depending on staff, and whether we want to go with the rollback rate or not. There's those both that are significant to the point of influencing the budget. So with that preamble, I will let Zach take over.
All right. So yeah, as Lee mentioned, this is a very preliminary set of numbers. I think one year I think we did have kind of real numbers, but I think the other, the last few years, sometimes this workshop has kind of just been purely kind of theoretical without even having kind of a tangible document in play. But I figured it's good to kind of just see it as we talk about it, work through. So kind of my thought again is, everything there is very rough, just kind of working numbers. But I've got a few things I'll just kind of share in terms of highlights, changes, where we're at, where direction is going to be needed. First of all, is kind of from the revenue side. The big one there, of course, is the general fund ad valorem as far as the millage rate and so forth. Just kind of for a quick perspective, based off of the preliminary values from the property appraiser, which usually probably doesn't change by more than 1%, maybe 2%. Right now, total ad valorem are about 14%. Cumulative about 10, and a third of that is existing growth in property values on existing parcels and structures. That 3.7% is just new construction being added to the tax roll. So when we look at the millage rate as far as rollback, it's that 10.3% number that comes into play there to say, hey, the same revenue being generated from the corresponding value on what existed last year, and it's just a change in the value versus new construction is always just kind of looked at as new to the tax roll. The budget here in terms of the revenue number in the general fund, kind of just based off of kind of past practice, the starting point is based off of the flat millage rate of 6.85. The rollback rate from kind of initial calculation would be about 6.21. Just kind of for perspective on what that means when we say, hey, if the millage rate is flat, or if we went to rollback, kind of probably the high end or the low end of where things might go the next couple of months, it's about $107,000 revenue difference in terms of if we're at 685, we'll collect about $107,000 more than we would at the rollback rate of about 6.2. So that, again, the ad valorem tax revenues are based off of the flat 6.85% millage rate for illustrated purposes. The other kind of big driver from the revenue side is the state revenues, so sales tax, revenue sharing, communication service tax, gas taxes. All of those numbers, usually in mid-July, the state puts out their estimates. So right now, I did about a 5% increase from actuals for fiscal year 22. So I would imagine those estimates are going to take us a little bit higher just because inflation, everything else, everything's been going up, but kind of said initially, let's keep it conservative and not kind of have all these high expectations and have to ratchet things the other way. So those numbers will have more firm estimates once we meet for the second budget workshop in a month or so. ARPA, really no provisions, nothing reflected here for ARPA because we recognize all those revenues under the standing allowance. We had about $1 million at the end of the last fiscal year. That would just be out of reserves either way, so it kind of not confuse things for now. There's been no provision to say, hey, we're going to use fund balance, the ARPA fund balance, and have those expenditures. So nothing currently is reflected. It's really kind of just focused on operations. From an expense perspective, as Lee mentioned, I know there's a lot going on. So at the moment, just kind of based off of, normally we do the detail person by person. Here's kind of how we get to the numbers based off of staffing, current pay rates, and then the COLA or other adjustments. Just now, for illustrative purposes, basically all of our personnel costs put in a 5% increase on different finance director, listserv, email groups across the state. There's been various kind of surveys going out. Hey, what's everybody proposing in the budget? Probably the most common answers have been 4 to 5%. I think maybe a couple have been at 3%, but that's kind of been the standard, what we've seen. And again, I figure it's better to start high and say, hey, did it have to come down? But for illustrative purposes, right now, all of the personnel is just a flat 5% increase on the prior year. Nothing done in more detail yet based on individual positions, pay rates, and so forth. And then one other area that I do want to get some direction on is last year, I think it was in one of the budget hearings, we talked about the hurricane and capital reserve. So that policy was adopted 3-4 years ago, where we budget to be ready for any hurricane expenditures 2 and 3. If we don't spend that and we have adequate reserves, that rolls into first the hurricane reserve and then the capital reserve. We had set a target of $300,000 for the hurricane reserve, where then kind of the overflow would go towards capital to have available for commission-directed capital needs. Right now, that last year, that hurricane budget amount was $70,000. I've upped that to $100,000 based on having some room. It's about 3% of the budget. The policy said 2 to 4%, so kind of right in the middle there. If all went well, at the end of fiscal year 24, under these assumptions, we would get that to $400,000, so we'd have kind of that first overflow over that 300. But in the workshop last year, we kind of said we would revisit. I think the mayor suggested looking at indexing that policy to say, hey, $300,000 was great 4 years ago, but where should that be now, and how do we look at what that does over time? So one thought there that I had this one where we have to bring that policy back to the commission. Right now, budget and general funds is about $3.5 million. If we said 10%, we're at about $350,000. So that seems like maybe that's a good 10% target for that baseline hurricane reserve. So I didn't want to just share that. Kind of get thoughts there, because again, if everyone's on the same page and say, hey, let's index that or make a change, enhancement to that policy, and I'd work, with Lee and Dominique to make sure we get that reflected to be out on a future agenda, versus that flat dollar amount. Capital in the general fund, sometimes it's kind of the plug to say how much do we have available for capital after all the needs, where I know one year we kind of, that was very bare bones. Last year we had about $130,000 for different capital items. This year's got $145,000, so it is one where in making everything balanced in terms of the expense adjustments for known adjustments of personnel and the revenue projections, overall kind of the two went largely in tandem, where it was, to a large degree kind of offsetting, not a whole lot of trickle down to say, hey, here's an excess $100,000 that just goes towards capital or things like that to get everything in balance. Outside of the general fund, everything pretty much kind of in line with before. Stormwater, of course, is one where that's pending. Rates there, the study and everything for future funding there. The water utility basically just kind of held flat from a revenue perspective. That's one where until all new meters get in there and going, that fund took a little bit of a hit from the revenue side in 22, and will kind of continue to not factor in any projected increases there yet until we know those meters are functioning and that revenue is all going to trickle through at a higher level.
Interrupt for 1 second, if that's okay. You mentioned the study, the Raftellus study that we're getting. Mr. Administrator, that Raftellus study, when are we looking to get a report back? July.
July 13th.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
When's the deadline on the reporting it, property appraisal?
August 9th.
Sometime in July for the impact pages.
They actually send the twin notices out to August 20th. We have to have it done prior to. Now, I have a conference call tomorrow with the property appraiser, because we are still discussing back and forth the issue of the amendment to the contract we entered into with them, requiring an extra public hearing if an assessment was over 50%. And this one would. The consultant is recommending based on the intentions of the commission. And so, but there's still confusion somewhere between us and the property appraiser about what constitutes an extra public hearing. Initially, they said it would be the one that the trim notice requires. And they said, no, it's got to be before that. So we're going to figure out tomorrow, hopefully, how many public notices we have and
How much effort was you presenting with the
well, right now, remember last year we were at $300 per year, or thereabouts. Our maximum now is $47 per year, and right now we're talking somewhere around 115. Yeah, so a little more to the half.
I was just thinking, wondering if we could just do 49% a year over the next few years to get a little more together without those,
Yeah, you could.
That's something we could ask Raftellus to plug into their system and give us some interesting feedback on.
Yeah, we are not close to even getting to the grant for that. We're working on one right now for the water distribution system. So it's going to be several years before we actually even stormwater part of it. And we've got, every time, you can't ask for a grant with forgiveness unless you finish the first one with forgiveness. But you can apply for a waiver. You apply for a waiver and then hear back from them. If they will waive that, then we can run these concurrent rather than sequential. So we haven't heard, but it's still, if you put the assessment in next year, that would really probably best go into a reserve for them, which would be the following year.
Put Bird Simpson on finding out what exactly the extra meeting is all about. So
The additional notice that the property appraiser is looking to get.
It's basically, the property appraiser doesn't want to be accused of
I get it.
increasing your taxes.
Let's get Scott to get to the bottom of it.
But if we need to have an extra meeting, I don't see why we couldn't.
Oh, we will agree to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we already said we would. It's just a matter of when, what triggers it, when is it, and one substitutes for another, and we said, we were told originally yes, now they said no, and so we gotta figure out, we're still talking past each other. And there's no conflict on our part.
So tomorrow's conference call should iron the vast majority of that out.
It should, but we
Should.
thought it was ironed out before, too.
Right. Is Bird Dog Simpson going to be a part of that conference call?
Oh, he's the main ingredient.
Oh, good, okay. That'll be helpful to have, because he's a bit of a bird dog, and that's helpful. He's persistent on those details more than I'm
Yeah.
capable of.
Yeah. No, he's, he set that up originally, and then he talked to somebody else in the organization, and they said, no, that's not the way it works. You know, that's the way we were told it works. So we're going to come up with it.
Jack, where is the police vehicle fund at? How did it find it?
The outstanding balance on the 1.2.
No, but probably 10 years ago that we decided to put away X number of dollars a year in a fund balance for police cars, so when we needed to purchase them, we didn't have to come up with the money.
So what we had started doing, I think, 2 years ago, is basically we had, after the mass purchase, again, 2 years ago, I think, we've got basically, I want to say, 50,000, might be 45.
How much per year? Because automobiles have just gotten stacked.
So it's in there right now, it's 40,000, basically.
A year?
Yeah. Yeah, so available per year, except we talked last year about putting in a figure there, basically, instead of having to every so many years do 4 or whatever it was,
Right.
to say, hey, if we get to the point where we're on rotation, where it's a new vehicle every year and every so many years, we basically changed out the entire
Or
fleet.
40,000 into reserve, and then when you do 2 or 3 in a year, it doesn't matter, because you've got the money.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
Yeah.
So sometimes you do a better job that way, by being able to buy, 4 or 5 at a time, get all that done all at once.
Right.
And
So you fund
every
that,
officer gets a new car at the same time, that kind of thing.
No. yeah, it's funded every 5 years, but you fund it every year.
Right, exactly.
Is the amount we're putting aside going to be enough considering the new values on vehicles?
So that, I'm kind of deferring to the chief on.
Right now, I've been on with Bain for that, so we got our vehicles before, and I'm currently working with we'll see. Rumor is he's the go-to guys for police vehicles in the state of Florida. He's busy, he has yet to return my calls. So Bain Corps is currently working, I was hoping to have them today, but he hasn't gotten them next week with a new quote. So we do have to replace a car that was lost during the hurricane. So I'm still debating on whether to get a new Charger to replace the Charger or just get another Durango. He's getting quotes for me on those vehicles, but there should not be much of a difference. So to give an estimate, we're right at $40,000.
That's what the last one cost with whiskers and those?
It's a little less than 40. So we're right at 40. That includes lights, that includes, everything but the graphics and the radios, which we've already purchased. So, but that includes all the equipment that comes in the car itself, not just the vehicle itself. So you're looking at right now with a 60-month lease, if we leased it, it's roughly $665 a month. For a 60-month lease, there is a new program that Bain Corps has started where they are doing a 4-year replacement in vehicles. I will try to explain this to you without complicating it, so bear with me. So if you do a lease for 5 years, at the end of your 4-year lease, you still owe another year on your lease, which is roughly $7,200. You can get a new car, and it costs more to buy out that lease, so it goes up to, let's say, $8,000. So you would have to pay $8,000 to get out of that lease. The joy is that you now have that car though, so you can sell that car to make up for what you paid on that lease. And as way these agencies like Orlando's doing it, Orange County's doing it, is they're actually able to sell these cars for $12,000. So they're actually getting $4,000 more. So we're getting a new car every 4 years, or they're getting a new car every 4 years, and they're saving $4,000 every 5 years, if I'm making sense, on the lease. And when I say lease, it's just the way they put it. These police cars are leased, but at the end of the 5 years, we pay $1 and the car belongs to us per car. So it's just the way that they did the numbers. But right now, we're still looking at an estimate of $40,000. By the time we have next meeting, I should have a firm figure.
By next meeting, it'll probably be 60.
They haven't, the police cars are not, or have not, weirdly, have not really drastically gone.
Good.
And I think there's just a burden everywhere, and I don't know if that's the manufacturers that are not trying to pass those costs on to law enforcement, maybe to the consumer or private vehicle. I don't know, but there hasn't been that big of a markup. The problem is getting the cars, you know, were they available? Like with these Dodges, it was over a check. You know, with the Chargers, it was over a door latch. You know, cars are being held up for 6 months because they couldn't get the door latch, you know, to open. Just little silly things. I don't know if those issues are still prevalent in vehicles, so.
For project purposes, I think we should raise that number by 10%, just to try and get it. I agree with you.
Yeah, for the police.
For the capital fund, yeah. Revenue reserve, or however you want to call it.
Yeah.
Where do we find that on the budget? What line items?
So that is, we added, so it's in the general fund detail, page 10 and 11 of that, detail. So it's account 001.2101.521.6400 for capital outlay equipment and PD. So that currently shows us 40,000. So we'll bump that up, 45,000, like around number.
Yes.
And then also, while we're, on that page, there's debt service, in the bottom part there, also in all the summary, schedules. If you look there and see 32,000 of debt service expenditures, that represents the annual lease payment on the existing one for the few police cars a year ago, just in case anyone says, what's all this debt in the general fund? Because the only true debt in terms of the note is still just that one SRF loan, the water utility.
How much is that? And what's the term left on that?
It's a little over $100,000 outstanding. We're paying, the big one got paid off in fiscal 22, I think it was. The one that's out there, it's a little over $100,000. We're paying $17,000 a year. So it has another 6 or 7 years, but it's a very small payment.
Okay. Thank you.
So
What is the balance on that? Is it balance on the capital outlay? Is that the 159.6?
that was last year's number, I believe.
So we added another phone
So the 159 was what we actually spent. So that was actually the acquisition of everything under the capital lease. Yes, that's the actual from the prior year. The 40,000 we had in the current year budget, and the 40,000 in the working fiscal 24 budget. That will bump that one up to 45,000, have available for next year.
Okay.
But certainly, if we don't spend the $40,000 that's in there for this year, that could then be rolled as well. To go
Yeah,
forward to next
that's a
year.
concern of mine, being in the general fund. Okay. It could be used for anything.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with the flexibility of that. I'm not okay if all of a sudden we think we're putting $40,000, $50,000 away and we get there and, oh, well, no, we spent it on a tractor or whatever.
Yeah, so what I would suggest there is similar to, and this is kind of where the way it's gonna show up at the end, and then we track it from the audit perspective and see if there, similar to what we did with the hurricane reserve, where that came to the commission by resolution to basically more or less have it be a formal restriction that was set by the commission, because staff can only basically assign, earmark it, we can't
Right.
move it up.
Yep.
Commission, you can't restrict it, that's external, it can be committed. So I would say there is if we want to have a formalized framework over capital, more anything in general, specific to police vehicles, however, we could certainly develop a quick policy that establishes for that, and then that would be pulled out, tracked, shown separately in the audit to say, hey, the police vehicle replacement fund, effectively, here's what that balance is, and then it would be one that every year very closely monitoring here's what was there in this, formally established fund. Here's what the current year budget was, $40,000, kind of what was earmarked to be added. And then here's what was spent out of it, and then the end balance is what it is based on the activity. So that's certainly.
Am I overly concerned, meaning that that's what we should do?
I don't think you're overly concerned. The problem is that I look at it like the, money up in Washington. Any pile of money, those grubby politicians are gonna get their hands on, one way or another. The same thing's true of us. If there's money in our accounts in the city of Lake Helen, the commission pretty much always has the authority to go do something with it. I don't think we can bind the hands completely of future commissions. By putting it in a designated reserve or a designated fund where it shows, very clearly that that's what it's for. It shows intent, and it also shows the public, if we start dipping into those, we have to do that publicly, and we have to declare that's what we're doing. So there is a layer there. It doesn't really stop anybody, but it does create at least a public impediment.
I mean, it's the accountability and the transparency are kind of, those are the two buzzwords, I kind of look at, like the ARPA money. It's the same thing, because we have some cities we audit where they had their ARPA funds, and under $10 million, you utilize the standard allowance to earn the revenue on paper. They just had to trickle down to unassigned fund balance, so if anyone said, hey, where are we at with the ARPA money, what was it used for, there was,
I don't know.
yeah. So that was why, we recommended saying, let's establish this policy where before anything can come out of the ARPA funds, it's got to be blessed by the commission, and that balance is shown separately. So that's kind of one where, it just gives it that separate line item kind of nature and financial statements and overall tracking, and whether it's significant enough to want it for that as well or not.
Well, if the rest of the commission wants to do something like that, put it on the next month's agenda, so you call it, if not, then.
I'd be happy to formalize something like that. Whatever, Zach or the city administrator can set up a fund like that that gives us a vehicle to show intent over the years. Because these are funds that aren't going away. We're always going to have police vehicles, and we're always going to have police cars.
And I don't want to tie anybody's hands, but I also, if I had an opportunity to put something in play, which supports what they may have to do down there, they will have to do that.
Right, and I think you're exactly right. What it does is enable future commissions to make purchases in a timely manner rather than all of a sudden being, having to come up with it. It enables them to just make intelligent purchases in a reasonable time frame. I think it's quite powerful.
We have, if I can interject, we have the electric fund as well. The electric fund is set aside from the purchase of
The sales of our utility.
the electric utility, 1980 something. It's 380,000 if I recall. I did a quick calculation a couple months ago of how many police cars I would have purchased in 1980, whatever. It was like 27 police cars. We're down to 9 now. Same amount of money.
It's just for, the vehicles that we have, and tell me if I'm wrong with this, in order to just take money and make money on it, are limited at best at the municipal level. You're almost better off spending it on something.
Infrastructure.
Yes.
And that's what I was going to suggest. We have to put a lot of people to do our infrastructure. But if we don't, it's going to be down to, nothing. Right now, I see the cheap grant below 50,000, they won't even talk about it because it's too small a number for them to think you're going to do anything meaningful with it. Again, at some point, our electric funds will become worthless. Practically speaking.
I mean, it was a nice idea to just say, okay, we're not going to business or whatever.
Right.
Let's keep this for a rainy day. But are you being responsible by saving money if it's losing value every single year?
We're very limited as a municipality as to where we can't go buy a stock portfolio with that. We can't.
They could have bought dirt,
Oh, yeah.
okay, and just spend it on dirt in 1981. I can tell you what I paid for my dirt in 1981.
You're right. Well, I want to throw that out because maybe there's something we can discuss at the next meeting. Any ideas? Because right now it's just going away, and it's a shame.
Well, so in those monies, I think it's 350,000, that in that fund, and that was, there was a referendum 3-4 years ago. Because that was part of the challenge of that, and there may have been one vote to totally unrestricted way back. I think that failed. The vote, again, 3-ish years ago, was to basically kind of classify as or now what we call the disaster fund.
Right.
Where it's available, hurricane or otherwise, it's an additional item available for a disaster. But the commission doesn't have the ability to, it would be one to say, hey, here's the plan, present that, put it on the
It's
ballot.
limited in its use, and even has a caveat that if the money is reimbursed to us, it's spent for disaster, it has to go back into that fund. So it's going to take a convincing of the public to do something with it.
Well, to me, that's pretty simple. This is how much the money was worth in 1981, this is how much a piece of land was worth. 2023, it's worth this much still, and this is what the land is. Well, maybe I think it might require some convincing.
Yes.
And it is, those dollars are in an investment account with the state, so that interest income has picked up. It kind of moves very close to just the market for a savings account. So we are earning interest on that. So that's where, even though it's 350, it's not just their non-interest bearing losing value. Those interest earnings are, now nice. Those flow into the general fund. But the principal, of course, the value on that decreases with inflation.
Why would the interest just roll right back into the funds of fund and grow?
Just the way it was
Designed to be
now, yeah.
Got it.
Inflation almost certainly has outpaced the interest on that as well.
Without a doubt.
Yes, for sure.
So,
Unseen federal tax.
So we've hit all of the highlights that I wanted to point out. I think really otherwise it's open for any other things that we want to make sure we accomplish, or really the areas I will want to get guidance on before we finish is going to be the personnel side of things from a COLA perspective, the millage rate perspective, to really have a consensus on the starting points. Of course, on the millage, once you set the numbers, whatever number we set today, we can't go above that, we can always go down. And then the same thing applies for the first public hearing as well. So that's one where, even if there's a thought to say, hey, your personal opinion is we can roll back or halfway, whatever it was, just keep that in mind that we can always go down later, but whatever we set, really, whatever you all formally vote on at the July commission meeting based off of the direction today, that then becomes the ceiling as we go through the rest of the process.
My philosophy hasn't changed since day one, until we get to the point where our infrastructure is at a place where it's healthy, and we have some fund balances to take care of emergency care in those infrastructure. It's an absolute waste of time to roll back. I don't think it serves anyone, and it most certainly doesn't put us in a better financial position to be able to do things which we need to desperately do.
I think that's very well said, and I would agree with that 100%. Anybody else want to weigh in on that basic, the rollback rate versus the current rate?
I'm not interested in rolling back either. I agree.
Thank you.
Just quick perspective too, when we do the final, the last couple of years, I've kind of done like a little budget facts and kind of just high level items. From the value increase, the residential has, any homestead property has a cap where it's inflation or basically CPI or 3% is the maximum. So at a flat rate, basically for any homestead property is a 3% increase just based off that value increase on flat millage. Just kind of as additional kind of perspective.
So you need to we need to take a vote on that rate today? Is that what
I think, You could, basic direction for Dominique to be able to prepare that vote that'll be on the agenda in July. So I mean, I think
So is that when
direction,
that vote needs to happen? I know this is typically,
This
this
is
is a
needs
workshop.
to be an official action, only a workshop.
Okay, that's what I was wondering.
Yeah, so there
We
would-
had messed up.
no, there will be action at that meeting. We saw the item today. I
Okay.
guess there is no vote, right?
Okay.
Unfortunately, yeah. As long as there's direction of what number shall be on that resolution.
Was that your question?
That was one of them, I was gonna make a statement.
Let me just introduce you first. Since you finished your basic report, we'll talk about the rate a little bit. I would like to get this good opportunity to open it up to the floor. I'll start with Mr. Preston.
Okay. Todd Preston, 352 Connecticut Ave. I was just gonna say, you're in a workshop, so you can't take a vote on anything, but you already realize that. My position on it would be that, because you have to set a preliminary rate, set it at 6.85. I wouldn't recommend anything higher than that, because I don't think that you need it. And then between now and then, we could figure out whether it could stay there or come back to the rollback rate. But having said that, I don't think that you need to add another $100,000 to the storm fund, because the initial plan was to get it to 300,000. So maybe you can consider adjusting that to CPI or something. You know, 'cause that's a 25% increase over what you set your target at. So, I think that's all I really need to say for it. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. President. We were looking at indexing it rather than with CPI, just making it a percentage of the overall budget. It gives us something where we don't have to readjust it every year. CPI and the percentage of the budget offer basically the same thing, although it's one's federal and one's us.
Might I
Yeah.
respond to that and say that the budget is growing much faster than the CPI?
Well, CPI, and that's also my point. CPI is set up by the federal government to save themselves money on their social programs, like Social Security and things like that. So they have a vested interest in keeping CPI low and not having it accurately reflect.
You can
real
target it to
expenses.
inflation too, that way.
But that's my
Right.
bias, if you will. And then it's just
I agree on the CPI, I mean, you target it to inflation, but, you know, setting it to a percentage of our budget is gonna continually increase that way more than what it needs to be.
fair enough. Okay, well, thank you. Does anybody else want to weigh in on potential budget items? Ms. Braska?
Yes, on any budget item, right?
Sure.
Okay. I was just made aware that our TNR program ran out of grant funds.
What's-
So
I'm
we
sorry.
have an agreement, an MOU, motion of understanding. We have a motion of understanding with the Volusia County Animal Services. And at the time when we made that, they did not have an amount put in there yet on what we would have to cover for spay and neuter. Now, it's only for cats. And then last August, August 24th, I believe it was, the Volusia County Animal Service applied for a grant called Franklin's Friends. And that grant applied for all municipalities that are under their motion of understanding, so that way we wouldn't have to pass on $45 to each resident for each cat that the residents bring in. That expired, we hit that limit on the 21st of June. So this Tuesday was the very first time that one of our residents had gone in. It was a trap and neuter day, a trap spay and neuter day, and they went in with 2 cats and had to pay $90 out of their pocket. Now, in that discussion that we had when we originally were discussing making that agreement and weighing the pros and cons of doing trap and neuter, TNR, let me just say it that way, for TNR, it was more beneficial for us to take on that expense than it was for us to take them out and euthanize them. The numbers spoke for themselves. So what I'm asking is that we put a line item in for that service. Right now, what we have done, we've done 28 cats over that period. We did 22 of them during that grant period. So I'm estimating 30 per year. At 45, that'd be about 13,000, 1,350. And if we have that line item in there, I think that would be great, so that way that cost, that expense doesn't go off into our residents who will then not be as willing to track, and then we'll have a bigger problem. If we put that line item in, we can also look into the grant of Franklin Friends. I'm not positive if we can qualify for it, because we do make donations within the city as an entity. So I'd have to double check, but I'd be more than happy to volunteer to take that task on with the blessing of the commission to see if we can apply for that grant. But in the meantime, to put that line item in to cover the expense. My idea is a resident comes into the city and says, I'm taking 2 cats. And we say, okay, I'm gonna give you 2 vouchers. Those vouchers can either be used at the DeBerry Clinic, which is also $45, or Volusia County Animal Services, which is also $45. It's just one's a little closer than the other. And then we can work out that payment to making sure we pay those, when those vouchers are presented to us, make sure that we pay those. So that's my suggestion, and I'd be more than happy to look into the grant to see if, work with staff to look into the grant, so that way to see if we can apply for that. But also, if we could have that line item in there to.
From my understanding, we talked about the spay neuter program. What convinced me to do it rather than euthanasia was when the information came down that when you trap, neuter, spay and release them back out, the colony stays. It doesn't grow, but it stays.
That's
when
true.
you euthanize, you completely remove the colony, and then it will be, that void will be filled by another colony who's not spayed.
Exactly.
So it's, at some point, there is a reduction. And so I don't have a problem funding it. But talking about $1,300 a year.
I just discovered this yesterday too. Everything that Ms. Raska is saying is absolutely correct. So the offset of is when we used to take cats out. Any feral cat, you put it in your yard. We took those to Halifax. That was $83 a month. To spay and neuter them, obviously, it was half the price. Adam Lee, who was director for animal control, has left. He is now the CEO for, I think that's the correct term, for Halifax. I spoke with him about it yesterday also. Halifax also offers the exact same service that Volusia County does.
Is that funded in your line items?
No, it's not.
Where is it funded?
It would need to be
It
placed.
would need to be funded. At the time, it was incumbent upon me, when the TNR program first started, when was it? Did we do it March last year, April? I
In
don't remember.
2021, we have implemented it.
It was 2021.
Yeah.
They did not have a fee schedule at the time.
Do you want to put it in your budget?
I think that it would be progressive for the city to pay those TNR bills because.
I do too. I'm just trying to figure out where we put it. That's
I don't know.
Yeah, I think we have to
Honestly,
create-
I don't know if that goes into our budget or I don't know how that works. But I don't have a problem putting it in our budget.
Could we
If that's where it
offset
goes.
with some of the animal control
Well, animal control is
fees?
under your purview, right?
Yes, yes, so, yes.
That's what you.
So without, are there any commissioners who don't want to do this, to fund the spay and neuter thing? I think it sounds like a reasonable thing. Anybody else?
Yes.
Yes, I think we should budget 1,500, I mean, if we're
That's right.
already at, 1350, we can always have an overage.
The whole
I agree.
process is it gets less and less every year.
Right.
That's the hope, yeah.
And the evidence for the TNR program is absolutely overwhelming. You have people that are against it, but it's,
That it works.
that is overwhelming. It works. And every single city does it.
So Zach, it sounds like that needs to be thrown in there.
You know-
We'll leave that to you.
All right. Kelly,
Hmm?
do you know how many cats were taken in last year?
Underneath that grant from August 24th to June 21st, it was 22 cats.
I would not say that's total though, because I paid
Yeah.
out of pocket for my own.
And that's
Just doing my
just, yeah, and that's just the ones who've taken it to Volusia County Animal Services. There was a while there at the beginning where people weren't familiar with Lake Helen actually being a part of that program, and so I've heard some were pushed through, you know, other means to get done.
Well, that's
And
one
then
of
we
those,
have everyone who pays out of pocket.
yeah, that's one of those programs where we would actually want to advertise that we're a part of that.
Yes.
It's good for us.
And there would have to be, when it came down to, there would have to be stuff put into place to prevent, I don't want to say fraud, but you don't want people, you know, you have people that really love cats, you don't want them coming into Lake Helen and having a cat, taking it, having it spayed, neutered, brought back, and the cat's not, they're not from Lake
Right.
Helen. Or they're from Lake Helen, but the cat is in the county jurisdiction.
I would think we could set up a policy that.
It would have to, they would just have to, you know, where was the cat picked up at, and just prove that you're a citizen of Lake Helen, you live with it, absolutely.
We can definitely set that up in a manageable way, and I appreciate your.
And the cats have to be taken from private property. They can't, I'm sorry, they have to be taken from mostly your property or somebody that you have permission. So nobody can go and set up a cat trap in Lake Park to catch cats. They're not allowed to do that. It has to be at their house, or a neighbor's house if the neighbor gives them permission, you know. But, so they, even empty lots, you know, just because we have an empty lot, people think, oh, but somebody owns it. City owns it or somebody owns it, so you can't do that either. So they have to show where the animals actually track that, because that's where the animals brought back to.
And just to be clear, we don't trap cats until we have an appointment, and it's the night before.
Okay.
It's inhumane.
Again, part of the policy we'll
Yeah.
set up on that.
And they are starting something where Tuesdays, once a month, there is no appointment, something like that, I'm not 100% sure, but there
Yeah,
are.
if the commission's okay with me working with staff with it, I would love to work with
Sure.
Chief Mullins and staff.
That's, yeah, that'd be up to you, Chief, if you wanna.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
I also sit on the Volusia County Animal Services Advisory Board for the county. But I wasn't aware of that at the last meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any commissioners, let's go back to commissioners. Any, if you want to weigh in on the budget or anything that you want to see put in the budget?
Have some questions.
Commissioner Roberts.
The very first page here has the yellow box on it. The line item charges for services. It appears, and I could be reading, it appears that it was 350,000 last year for stormwater, and I'm only seeing 70 this year.
So what that,
Reason?
yeah, so that related to was, and it's on the, you'll see the history on,
Between all of them, so.
okay, so it's actually how it kind of flowed through. But so what that difference was last year when there was a discussion over the stormwater assessments and that increase, and it basically said anything on the, solid waste stormwater would be covered by the ARPA funds. So that 350 was it last year? That represents what that full amount was that was basically being discussed, where the cash, the new cash assessment was at about 70,000 because there was no actual increase. So that differential is just what could have been made available from the ARPA funds if those projects came along in the current year. So the cash has kind of progressed from 60,000, 65, 70. So that was kind of going back to where it was, and then of course with the rate study for next year, we'll probably have some sort of a, whatever that becomes, 200,000, 150, whatever the number based on that assessment change. So really the prior year number was somewhat of artificial inflation because of the ARPA funds that were earmarked to supplement the new cash, for lack of a better word, assessments.
Okay, so this increase, what would it be versus the actual?
It was about 65 or so last year. Where are we at? So our budget last year was 60,000. So the 70,000 was some of the CPI related increase, with all the development. It'll probably be in somewhere in the upper 60s, just based off where it's been the last couple of years.
Okay.
I said until we get done with the stormwater. That's for me.
And timing wise, if those assessments are revisited, and so I was just thinking for future, but if it all is worked through fast enough that there's an adjustment to, hey, the stormwater rate is gonna increase by 49% for this upcoming year, then we'll update those numbers accordingly. So this is basically kind of flat.
Yeah, I would do that right out of the gate, because that you know you can do today
Yeah,
without any additional hocus pocus.
yeah.
And
Yeah, so this-
we all know that we need it. I mean,
Right.
so,
Yeah, so this currently is just flat based on the existing rates.
So what would 65 times 49 be, and then could we adjust the budget for that?
You do that, yeah, do that on that.
Great.
I would just make it so until we can
Okay.
eat, because
We know it's
if we
coming.
mess around, we
Yeah.
get past the deadline, we walk that opportunity. It's not what we want, it's better than something.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, we don't want to lose another year. And I assume it's similar that if we set it high now and back it back down a little bit, Ralph tells us, no, you only need X, we can back it down, but we can't go up at some point, we can trap ourselves. Well, it's pretty better to start high.
According to what Lee said, it's doing significantly higher than that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay.
But we don't want to be not trying to raise it last minute again. Right. I know that's your point too, I'm just saying, again.
So the number for capital projects here, the expenditures.
Being way higher last year.
And I'm sure that had something to do with Virginia Drive, but I mean, we have projects going on all the time. This 22 was a little concerning to me.
Yeah, so I mean, that's one of the, there's not a ton of excess in the stormwater fund. If there's a major project that we were to save up for, I'm the current assessment rates, we're saving up for a long time to be able to kind of self-fund something outside of a grant. What that represented was really tied into the ARPA funds supplementing the revenue, and saying that that was available for capital projects out of the ARPA funds, if needed.
So what did we have, what was the actual on this? What did we actually set up the capital?
So that's in progress. So last year, I mean, this year's in progress. Last year was 170. And then we did have Virginia in there last year, which was 786,000.
Right.
And the bulk of it. From my notes, there was about, it was like 70,000. That was other non-Virginia projects.
So then, I don't know that this 22 is adequate.
Correct.
We need to.
I think we all agree with you, but there's currently no source or revenue to pay, to say that, hey, here's where the money's gonna come from to have additional.
Okay.
Unless, at some point, if we said, hey, we're gonna use ARPA funds, we could do that. But in terms of within the standalone stormwater fund and fund balance there, those resources are not even there to be made available, whether it's current year assessments based on current rates or prior year fund balance. Just for perspective, our ending fund balance in stormwater last year was about $43,000, which we spent about so last year we spent down $105,000 of our stormwater fund balance towards projects. So again, not sustainable if those were recurring year in, year out. So only about $43,000 available going into the current fiscal year from 9/30/22.
Okay, I see.
So that's where it's pretty much just kind of, here's what the new money is, and that's pretty much all we got to make use of. And again, the 24 proposed is working off just the same assumptions until we have an increase in that assessment.
Okay.
And I'm assuming that when we get large storm projects, we're going to go out with funding.
Well, you know, the stormwater rate that is being developed by the group will forecast the projects as Derek has forecast them. They're all not coming out the same year, it'll be sequential. And we'll take the assessment and program over the same time period so that we're paying even amounts. But they'll all be funded at one time.
Right.
They'll obviously be in chunks that are easily digestible. That's clear again.
Yeah, but I guess what I'm getting at is this stormwater fund balance that we're going to here is not necessarily the vehicle we're going to use on the major stormwater project.
Well, it's the same fund, but this is basically just.
Yeah, okay, yes. Because there's going to have to be additional monies coming from someplace else.
And it'll be minuscule compared to what we really need, and that's what the new rate will bring.
Right.
This is a vehicle to the maintenance and hopefully the match.
Yes.
That we have on some of these grants where it's 25% match.
Yes. Right.
Yes, we don't want to just, we want to pass on anything we can on the grants that we, it's a vehicle we can't afford to pass up. I don't know how many grants there are available on stormwater as opposed to potable water. I think it's less, but basically, whatever there is, we need to go after.
SRF is not technically a grant, and I don't know why, I'm sure there's a legal reason somewhere. But we'll borrow 100%, and then 41% will be forgiven. And so that's, we have to pay back then 59%. And I don't think you can offset that 59% with a grant.
Right, and also though, when it comes to stormwater, we're probably not going to get that same deal.
Oh, yeah.
You think so?
Oh, yeah.
Well, great. So yes.
Yeah, now, but
I don't think that's
there is,
available.
let me say, there is a priority. I mean, drinking water first, sanitary second. I'm not sure what, I mean, stormwater is the lowest of the priorities for those funds. But they are accepted for, everything in the division will be funded each year for this.
This account here, it looks like we already have an animal control fees account. Would that be adequate to the
So that was a revenue that's really been discontinued for a number of years. I think that's your own budget last year. And that would have been, I didn't even know the last time there were revenues in there.
Right.
That would have been just miscellaneous, somebody paid a fee for, versus on the outlay side for the program we discussed, will be absorbed in the cost.
Okay, we can't transfer that over into the police.
So we'll add it, it'll be a separate kind of department, just because the state has a prescribed chart of accounts, so it kind of fall under animal control, where there's gonna be a separate kind of division under animal control, the way that we're supposed to track expenses. So we'll add a new line up for that one.
Okay.
Ms. Preston, if you want to-
Yeah, I just was noticing, I don't have a page in my packet for the salaries. Is that not included?
No, we're not going to dive into that now, I don't think. I mean, if the commissioner brings it up, we might, but
Well,
we're just,
historically, it's always been included into all the workshops, so historically, it's been included into the workshop, budget workshop, so I was just wondering if I was missing it.
And that was, I mentioned it briefly just earlier, that just, there's enough influx that I just wanted the 5% for kind of illustrative purposes, and then we'll work to get specifics down
Okay.
as we keep on going. But at this point, just kind of get the direction, which I do want to get that direction, so what we thinking as far as a COLA in terms of taking where everyone's at now and the flat increases.
What was the last COLA?
That was 3%.
Yeah, this year was a lot more.
I think it was 5, and police were, last year was, yeah, 5 universal last year, 10% for police. That's what was in last year.
5 and 10?
That's what we did on the budget, or that's what
That's
the
what-
COLA?
That was the COLA.
Okay, yeah, I was referring to last year's budget. When we budget last year, there's a COLA increase.
Oh, just in general?
Yes, I think it was 3%.
So, yeah, usually 3 to 5, just, I mean, and some are more fixed than others, but yeah, 3 to 5. And this year, kind of 5% is what I'm
Yes.
probably in ballpark, again, just from inflation.
Matt, is it possible, I am seriously considering bringing on another officer, if all possible, with the starting pay around 21. I've done a salary study, which we gave to everybody, in April, and as you can see, the average starting pay in Volusia County right now for all agencies is $21.84. By comparison, when we did the salary study, same time last year, it was $19.85. So there's been a $2 increase in starting pay. And currently, I have officer making $19.80 an hour. We've done increases with Public Works. I think in the past year, we've got 4 employees now that are making $20 an hour for one left. But there has been 2 employees that were hired at 20, another was brought back to 20, and then somebody was given 20 when he went from part-time, or part-time to full-time. So we're well below. We're just too below. Well, we're right now, our starting pay is $18.50, so we're $3.34 below, industry standard.
But it's such a joyful place to work.
But, so when we were talking about 5% increases also, this is going back, the officer, that is still going to be up.
Chief, that's all part of the union negotiations.
Sure. But I just.
Right now, it's with the commission and the
Okay.
union. I don't think being popular.
Even bringing on another officer,
Oh, no.
I think that's what I'm talking about with.
But the rates, yeah, the rates don't really,
Yeah.
they don't fit in this meeting, they fit in the union negotiation.
Yeah.
But bringing on another officer and that being the ballpark of 50, 60,000, whatever it's gonna add to the budget, that's certainly appropriate here.
We did forecast 2 new officers for Orange County in the original $485 million.
In this budget?
No, in
Forecasting,
the
they were
forecast
looking
is
forward.
It'll still be probably a year and a half to 2 years away from needing it. But it's something to think about. I don't know how soon the chief's talking about adding, but what I'm saying is we've already talked about adding at least 2. I presume it's one of the.
We'll talk about having and actually budgeting for 2 different exercises.
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
And I think what the chief's saying is he would like to budget for another police officer. Is that what I'm getting?
For next year, yes.
Yes.
But I'm just asking to make sure this is, it's one of the 2 we talked about. Or just having a 3 arrangement.
Oh, I understand.
Well, how does that fit in here?
I'm sorry.
How does that fit in? The city administrator was saying, we had talked about an additional
Sure.
2 necessary for.
If Orange Camp, whatever happens with that, we would probably need, yes, a second officer. So that would not be hiring another officer and then 2 more.
No, so it's one of the 2 we talked about.
I would say so.
Chief, when are you thinking about putting that number on?
October.
But you'd like to do it as soon as next legislature.
The reason why is I have reserves. I like to hire out of our reserve pool. They've established, they've been here, they work for nothing, volunteering, and I hire out of the reserve pool. The offset is getting somebody out of the academy, not saying they're bad officers, but there is an extensive training. When you go work for a larger agency like Daytona or Land, and 3-month FTO, they're gonna see so many more calls than you're gonna get here. So it really takes a good year for a Green officer to become comfortable, to actually do the job, not to mention to learn the streets, learn the people, learn the citizens. So, and it just takes a lot of training. So with bringing one other officer on, I would be able to, it would make it easier for if we needed a second officer later, but I don't have to train 2 people at the same time, because we might not have a reserve that wants to join.
Do we have-
Basically,
Do we have a funding mechanism to add another?
I mean, my thought from the discussion is for the next budget workshop, that is added in. If it's one that, hey, we're in a deficit because of it, but I think just for illustrative purposes, I mean, well, I'm hearing, I feel like we put it in there and then
Yes.
that's
I know
discuss
that's
where we're
how
at.
much it would cost, base.
You're being
So-
aggressive, so.
All in probably 65.
I did 62 for it, and that's not including overtime, so 65 is probably still right there on how much it would cost.
But,
And that includes insurance, life insurance,
Yeah.
and starting out as well. If we moved
don't,
Or can we get into that?
go
In
ahead.
terms of the starting salary, what to use in that assumption?
That was based off of 21.
Okay.
Well,
It's just a number.
yeah,
Yeah.
Don't get bogged.
it's in the ballpark.
I got enough to utilize.
We're not negotiating that now, let's be clear.
Where does this, what hole does it fill? Or where does it overlap?
It fills in, right now I have 4 officers to cover 4 shifts. We have 2 night shifts, 2 day shifts. I have swing shift. So they cover from 2 to 2, but they also cover when officers are out sick, when they're in school, when they're on vacation.
So would there be any savings in overtime because of it?
Yes, there will be savings in overtime.
Can you do the math on it?
I could,
And then-
we're not talking a grand,
No.
we're talking
Yeah.
a couple of grand, maybe, but I could possibly try to do the math.
Yeah, well, it's not a big deal.
Sure. And what the whole does is it gives me to where we have a night shift officer, the day shift officer, and they've got a good portion of their shift where it's doubled up at all times. With one swing shifter, it's only working for 1 day shift, 1 night shift. So if I have 2 more officers on, that gives me 2 officers on for 12 hours a day during our peak times.
I don't want to sound unsupportive.
Sure.
But I want to ask this as if Jane or Joe Citizen would ask, what has changed? Why do we need a new officer?
It is, the times are changing. The times are changing. It is, when we have an officer who is working, for instance, something minor as a traffic accident. An officer's off the road while he's working that traffic accident. So if he gets another call, he can't leave that call. So we're gonna have to rely on somebody else to come and hold the scene until that officer gets there. So we had DUIs where somebody took out a power line, and I got 2 officers on. One person can sit on the vehicle, wait for the power company to get there, which would take an hour, 2 hours. The other officer would do the paperwork, take the guy to jail. I've got an officer here. So it keeps it to where you have more coverage, and more patrol within the city at any given time. I mean, taking something as simple as taking the dog out to the pound, that's a good hour and 15 minutes that an officer's out of town. And when I have another officer here, in those peak hours, we have more.
Well, let's stick it in and we can continue to discuss it.
Any other commissioners that want to weigh in on that, as whether we should include that, are you amenable? I know it's not a vote, but it's just time to express your opinion. Want to weigh in on that? I mean, it's kind of in your, a little bit of it in your arena sometimes with the public service type
I'm not
stuff.
gonna say no.
Fair enough. Okay, just check. I don't mean to put you on the spot. I just want to share your
Damn, more people get hired.
There.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I can't see you.
Burton Burton, 690 West Ohio. I hear the chief, I hear him, that the times are changing. And a lot of the things that our officers are providing now are because they're overlapping. You don't really get to see it because things are pretty quiet. But one time something happens, then all hell's gonna break out. So you really gotta plan for it in advance. I think he said that Orange Camp will be coming online in about 2 years. So in 2 years, you're gonna have 300 units that could be 1,000 people. So to wait till you get to 1,000 people to start hiring new officers to learn the city doesn't sound, convenient to me. Being out there requires many more things than just making a traffic stop, an overlapping accident, a medical emergency. So you go on and on and on. We probably have been dodging a lot of bullets. I don't mean figuratively, but we've been dodging a lot of bullets where we haven't had to have our officers respond, and then have a situation where an officer does not have proper backup. We haven't had that yet, but yet there's always someplace in the vernacular. So I just give that, and I hear Lee saying that you have a union now. I wasn't around when you had a union. You have a union now, but that becomes the union's obligation to argue on behalf of the officer, and the union is basically going to be an input to this system that you're going to be used to. And we haven't had a union before. Officers, public works, everything else has been working under, I should say, over their capacity without being paid and compensated properly. And because of the dedication that officers, public works has had, we kind of like, you know, we kind of rode the wave. But the bottom line is that the city is changing, and I would just suggest that we get ahead of that change and not try to catch up to it, because catch up is the hammer us.
Thank you, sir. So it sounds like we have kind of consensus on adding an additional officer. And any other items by other commissioners who want to bring in and make part of what our city does? This is the time to do things right. I have one thing, but I want to open it up to y'all first. And I don't need you to lay out things yet, but if you want to, let's do it.
No, but I do have one easy question. I don't have.
So that's,
Is it just a like?
yeah, that's
Okay.
just
I thought that maybe. the
I'm trying to
case,
get a
but-
format so I didn't say
Right,
it.
okay, not a problem, just making sure I have to miss something.
Well, one of the things I wanted to bring up, not one of the things, the thing I wanted to bring up, is I would love us to hire a Parks and Recreation / events coordinator, make them part of the city staff. I'd like to do that. I think we've said numerous times in the past that that position ultimately can pay for itself, and does, particularly after the first year or so, when once those things are getting established. That can pay for itself, or at least largely pay for itself, and really be a huge benefit to the city. One of the things that we had to do when I first became mayor was, I mean, it was right there in those first couple of months, we ran into the legal side of Parks and Rec committee having so much trouble with the Sunshine Law, and we had to basically disband them and tell them they couldn't do anything anymore. And that was a terrible position for the city to be in. If we were to add a Parks and Rec director, then we could have, that person could have as big a committee as they wanted. It's what, and Scott, if I'm wrong, Scott, you can hear me. But anyway, I think I'm not wrong. Where it runs into the problem is if the committee is directly advising the commission. If we have a committee standing to give us information and they're advising us, then they're bound by the Sunshine Law because they're a part of us. But if they're just working for a Parks and Rec director as a volunteer group, there's no sunshine anymore. So that group of people and energy within the city that wants to do that would be freed up and available again. There would be a mechanism for them to thrive under. So that's one big reason for it. I think it would be great to have. Last year we didn't get it in. We were looking more at stormwater and we hit that wall. I want to say, in defense of that, go back one step here to a different topic. When I hit that 300 number, I was looking at replenishing stormwater where we had, through stormwater projects, pulled a lot out of general reserves for several years, and we were replenishing that and then breaking even. Now I think this is a much better mechanism with Brad Tellis to tell us where we are, give us a professionally generated number that's much more defensible than mine. Than where we started out last time. So pleased with that stormwater where that's going now. I'm pleased that we're getting that kicked off. It's fantastic. I would love to kick this in though to a Parks and Rec director / events coordinator. I think starting right out of school with that degree, you're looking at about 60,000. I was talking to the city administrator, around 60,000. That's somebody green right out of school with that training. So obviously, if you wanted to get somebody with some experience, which I think is very beneficial in a city this size, where they're not joining the staff, they are the staff. So they need to know everything. I think it'd be better for us to hire somebody with 10 years or so experience, and probably be more up in the 70, 75 range. I think that's where you get necessary qualifications or the experience and qualifications to really make this work well. What are y'all's thoughts?
I think it's a great idea.
Thank you.
You notice I didn't go on for 10 minutes to come to that?
Well done. Yeah, it took me too long, I'm sorry. Anybody else have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, could you provide like maybe a synopsis of what you imagine this person is responsible for, their job duties? Just a quick outline.
I have not prepared that, so I could brainstorm a little, but and I probably wouldn't do it well. A basic Parks and Rec department that was responsible for overseeing all the activities in all the parks, and also any events that would take place in those parks. There would be a lot more oversight. We had the Strawberry Festival that largely fell in Chief's lap last time, but that would fall more under the events coordinator. Obviously, the police would still have a lot of parts to it, but the events coordinator would be organizing all that, negotiating the contracts for things like that would be started there. It would come up from there, but hopefully starting out festivals. We used to have more festivals here than we do currently. We still have some wonderful things, car shows and whatnot, but we used to have more art festivals and things like that. I would love to see those get reestablished and reinvigorated, get the city reinvigorated as more of an arts type feel to it. We've got a lot of artists in this town. This is a very artsy little community, although we don't see it because we don't support it as a city. 1 minute. I will get to you. Any other questions from commissioners on that? I didn't flesh that out very much, and I can. I can put together a full job description.
No, that was very helpful. I wasn't sure if you were talking in terms of similar to what the board was doing previously and advising the commission of equipment and the needs of the park and
There would be some of that involved, obviously. I mean, not obviously, but I think, yes, that would be a part of that. More so it would be.
Yeah, I mean, it's we have, if you just go through and you look at the list of events that we have in Lake County right now, all of that workload falls back on staff. And it's often overwhelming. And we haven't even talked about, there's touched on it, continuing to grow events, continuing to recognize the assets we have in the community and have events that are enjoyed by not only all of us in Lake County, but people on the outside of the community. And I think the right person, a dynamic personality, along with educational background, could easily have no function during the course of the year faithfully. But it has to be the right person, not just anybody who's going to be able to create their own salary. But I think I felt 10 years ago we talked about having an events coordinator. This is where the city needed to go to be able to marquee some of the assets that we have and take that workload off the shoulders of overworked, underpaid staff.
Well, what happens is that things just sort of fade away because there's not an energy there supporting them long term. A city administrator or a public works director or a deputy clerk is just not going to be out beating the bushes to make festivals happen.
And here's
just not going to work.
One of the things that the elephant in the room, as far as I'm concerned, is we lean on volunteers in this community for a long time. What we did not have is Mark site work. And now volunteers are more and more difficult to get. just because of what Mr. Zuckerberg gives. And so if you don't have the volunteers to be able to do the work, it falls back on staff. Okay, let's put the proper staff in place to get the job done. And people think, yes.
And we can have another workshop just to go over a job description that we create for the Parks and Rec coordinator.
Yes, absolutely.
We certainly bring some of that to the next meeting, whether it's another workshop just for that, if that's what you like, I'd be fine with that, because I feel strongly that it would be beneficial. I think maybe we can just do it at the next budget workshop, if we go ahead and put the numbers in, and if it doesn't work out, we'll take them out. But I would like to start the process. I had one other hand up first, but I'll open up the floor, Mr. Preston, and then Ms. Weir.
Okay, Dave, I just wanted to ask, can I recommend that we possibly survey the region and make a determination to set a competitive rate based on the region rather than just guessing at what we think the position is worth?
That's I'll just answer you. I think that's a very reasonable thing to say and ask. I just came up with that number in 15 seconds of the conversation.
If you do the due diligence, you probably have a better
Sure.
opportunity.
We'll definitely do some salary surveys and come up with a much harder number than that. But budgeting is round numbers. At least that's what I do it for. Ms. Weir?
Yes, and I'm not opposed. I'm definitely not opposed. I know the value, I know the land. I don't believe they pay as much as you're suggesting, but they do have someone. And they do pay for themselves eventually. I'm surprised we don't have any salary information to go with this budget, especially since we'll be hiring a new city administrator during the next fiscal year. I know there's issues, where we're going with public works. I think that should all have been part of today's discussion, so that all the cards are out on the table and everybody here has an idea of what we're doing.
Well, we do have line items in the budget for city administrator salary and public works director salary. So those are there in the budget.
Are they in here?
We've had a city administrator, we've had a public works director, and we've had budget for those departments.
They're not in here. Historically, they've always been part of our budget that we've reviewed.
Did you delete those positions?
They're the expenses are there, but as I mentioned when we started, the position by position, because there's so much in flux, I just went with that 5% on everything, and then the details will shift whichever way, just because it could go up or down when you've got major positions being discussed.
Well, let's take a public works director, since there's nobody filling that position right now. Is that not reflected in this budget at all?
It's reflected basically based on the prior year budget.
So it's historical. That's what I assume.
Yeah, so basically what we had in there plus 5% in totality.
So it is in there.
Yes.
Thank you.
It's just not that level of detail.
It's only in there as one group figure, it's not spread out like it was last on the spreadsheet.
Which we'll have that in the later one as well, just again, just enough in flux that
Well, historically, like you did with some of the items, you would have, last year, this year, going forward, and it kind of gives an idea of where we have come as a city, how we have increased our pay out to our employees. And I will tell you, being friends with another city administrator, former city administrator or manager, we have done very well with bringing our public works up to $20 an hour, where larger cities are just now implementing the state mandate at $15 an hour. So we should be attracting good workers, employees, but I also think we have to have a balance there where we're not continually raising salaries. We have to find a balance. So I think as a taxpayer, I kind of like to see all these things in front of me.
Well, the budget being presented by our finance director, this was his choice as to how he presented this packet. You're right, we have had the historical, 3-year historical before us in previous workshops, and we could provide that again, and if you would like to have that available at the next
I
on a
would.
budget meeting.
I would.
I'm trying to figure out what people are gonna get out of it, because currently we have X, and now we're gonna have X times
I think it
5%.
shows how we have progressed. I know some people are making triple what they were making 15, 18 months ago.
It's not an unreasonable request to see the district.
I think people should know. And
Yes,
it's-
and it's not difficult, it is.
I don't need it to know. Okay, if you need it to know, then provide that for people to know, but I don't need it to know.
I think.
Because I know what we did last year.
I think you may not want to know, but I think a
No,
lot of us
there's
would
a
like to
difference
know.
between want to know and need to know. I don't need to know, because I already see the numbers. I know what we did last year, I know what we did the year before that, the year before that, the year before that. And every year's a new challenge. This year's challenge comes from this radical increase in, inflation. Okay? So if the recommendation coming down the line is between 5 and 8%, and we're gonna use 5, that's just saying, okay, just to keep everybody here up with inflation, we're just gonna add 5% across the board. To me, I don't need to see any more to know that that's the right thing to do today.
I'm not saying giving them 5% is the wrong thing. I think as taxpayers, we would like to know how our money is being spent. Is there, I know we can't talk about the police department stuff.
We can't negotiate a salary here today, we can't get into
No, but
negotiations.
I understand that, but
That was the caveat there. And what Mr. Basso makes a point, all of the past budgets are public record, they're all there, people can do the research. Historically, though, in workshop meetings, we have had that historical data in front of us, and I think we could reproduce it. Is it very difficult to reproduce a budget with a 3-year history behind it?
So the format, kind of like the budget document, is the same as it's been the last few years. There was a precedent from Commissioner Basso to be able to see some historical. So that's one, just because it gets, we're adding more columns. So I did send that to Lee, so it's available in Excel format with basically the same detailed schedules in the packet. With the 2 additional, so you got your actual 22, 21, and 20. So that is available, Lee has that.
Okay, so if you would like to get that, you could request that from staff tomorrow, and they can print that for you.
Okay, well, I'm not trying to dig into too much. I just want to, right here is 2020, or 2022, 2023, 2024. I'm not asking you to go back to 2020. I think it would be helpful for everybody if we're going to be assessed even more beyond our taxes. I think we all kind of need to know where our money's going.
We have to be very clear as to how we're spending it.
Excuse me, Mayor, I don't mean to cut you off. I'm not saying you don't need to know, you do need to know. You do. If you need information so you are comfortable with what we're doing, then you need to get that information. I'm just saying, I don't need it because I already understand it. I'm
Okay. I don't have your understanding, so I'm
That's
not
okay.
saying.
That's correct.
Well, yeah, and it's not.
And not the only.
You have one shot at the outlook, Mr. Knott.
Secretary Shalom, Linda Otto, Lake County Novellas. I want to tag on to what Ms. Weary was saying, because I've been talking to my constituents, since I'm now going to be replacing Commissioner Basso, and I wish you all good luck in your retirement after 13 years. I'm sorry?
Thanks.
You're welcome. One thing that people are asking for where I live is a variance report. I haven't seen one.
A variance report?
A variance report. This apparently occurred with the commissioners back in the future, or back in the past. Yeah. And what that did, in my understanding, was it was a monthly report that was made available to the citizens that showed expenses, revenues, and then they could see monthly what was occurring. Could that happen again, to where these people can actually see on a monthly basis? Because quite frankly, poor Dominic, she's had to take several of my calls this week. I don't quite understand this budget. Everything looks like it's a negative number because it's in brackets. Miscellaneous items are revenue, but we don't know where they're going because there's no line items just going into a general fund. So I'm looking at what I thought was a miscellaneous report on dollars expenditures, and in fact it was revenue, which just made no sense to me. I don't know if that's the way this city does it, or all city does a report like this, but it was very confusing. And if it's confusing to me, I'm pretty sure it's gonna be confusing to my constituents.
I know the first year that I was in office, I went to see an old friend of mine who used to be Santa Claus, and I spent about 2.5 hours a night for 3 or 4 different nights to get to the point where I understood this. And I had already run my own business, and I already had a P&L sheet with it. So municipal accounting is a unique animal all to itself. And what will happen over time is, if you sit here for much time, you will learn a lot the first year. You'll learn less the second year. And by the third year, all you're going to be doing, like saying when you have 3 years in front of you, you'll be able to look and just say, okay, all of these numbers are that, I did that over here, I did all the homework. Now the next year, I'm just looking at what's different, what's changed. And not a lot changes, so as you get more and more years behind the belt, you become more and more comfortable. But I would highly advise any new person that sits in any of these chairs to go find an accountant, have them go over the budget, explain it to them, let it marinate, go back again when things start to fall into place. It's,
Well,
because it is a lot.
Again, are we getting into my time here?
No, you're right.
Okay. It's not me so much. I was very confused on the miscellaneous line item to find out that, well, that really wasn't what it was. It was revenue, not expenditures. So I'm asking for an expenditure report, and I'm looking at this stuff going, why are we spending this money? So I called Dominic, and I discovered, lo and behold, that was revenue. That was it. Right. So, my point is, we've got 65-year-olds, 70-year-olds out there in the villas.
Right.
As a commissioner, I want to be able to explain to them, that's not going to happen when I give them a spreadsheet 3 years long. So that's why they ask about the monthly variance report.
I think that at some point, the business of the city becomes so large, the great majority of people don't understand it.
That's the to me. That's we're representing them.
Yes, exactly, and that's why you're here, to help them understand exactly what it is.
Exactly. Well, I can't take, like I said, to a 70-year-old 3 years and try to explain it to them.
Well, the variance.
Well, you know that, then how do you expect me to do that?
Well, the variance report you're talking about, I'm sure you have exactly something in mind that you've seen before. And if you could provide that,
I would be happy.
I'm sure we could probably come up with something very similar that wouldn't necessarily be very difficult to create that report that came out monthly.
That would be nice.
We do have monthly reports that we get from the finance director that we have tailored the way we like them right now, but we can retailor those.
That would be greatly appreciated.
Within reason. I don't want to speak out of turn, but I think he's a pretty capable gentleman and
Well, we haven't met yet. Hi, Zach. I've always think back in your head. Okay, that would be great. I want to be able to go back to our citizens, especially the villas, and let these people know that yes, the commission is working with them so that we'll be able to understand together, and especially they'll be able to understand what's happening here in City Hall. Okay, thank you.
appreciate that.
One note, just as well, kind of some of those points, is with the accounting software conversion that's been in the works now for almost a year, probably since Clarion was first brought to the commission. There's been testing, implementation, kind of ongoing process. We're looking at a go-live date of August 1st, maybe to a parallel arrangement, but one of the, I think, benefits we'll get to where that can be developed for us is even more, interactive. I know, Roger, we talked about the, commission view on Encode, and there's a lot of just limitations, inefficiencies with the current software. So it could be one that we eventually, a Clarion in some of your demos and just seeing kind of what they've done for others or can do. There's some where there's, kind of public facing different reports kind of showing budget detail, expense detail, things like that. So hopefully with that conversion as well, there may be some additional enhancements we can even do that kind of make some of that information available, more in real time too.
Will there be, once we are fully in the new system, are we going to lap history? Or will that history be migrated over and will we be able to create it through your? Okay.
Yeah, we migrated everything, every full fiscal year that we did. So when we went to Tyler, when the city went to Tyler's, I was on the audit side, at that point, everything was in QuickBooks was not imported either due to issues with Tyler or otherwise, but every full fiscal year, so I think fiscal year 18 and forward, that's been imported into Aquarian, so we'll have that transactional type level detail.
Ms. Raskin?
I just want to make a suggestion.
I'm sorry, yeah. Actually, I had given Mr. Burton away a minute ago. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I have two quick things. Mr. Nada, I really share your concern for the 65 and 70-year-olds grasping this stuff. Yeah. Well, I'm 75, so I'm trying to catch up too.
Okay.
The other thing is on the water, on the utility. I see you have a $914 budget that's 23 and projected forward. There are a lot of meters that are not operating. Is that why that number has not changed? Okay, now, the question I have as far as our legality, part of the reason that when we got the loan, it was told that we could not give away water. And I can remember a number of times I was going to commission and the little lady came in and, pipe busted. She didn't realize it. She got a $600 water bill. And we said, there's nothing we can do about it. Now, the way things stand now, my last water bill has not changed in, I think, 3 cycles. Well, let's just say I decided to get a swimming pool, and I fill up my swimming pool with the meter not running. How liable is the city for giving away water because
We're not.
well, we're not.
It's a reasonable question. I don't think we're liable. We're making a good faith effort to get that financing acquired.
I'm only asking this question because I was asked that question now at the flea market.
Well, there's a couple of answers that have to fit together. One of them is we have 44% of our meters are not registering flow. And it started in 2018. Meters went in 2015. The difficulty started in 2018, and we're still living in those difficulties. Part of the problem is our rates have increased each year based on inflation that sets out in the policy. So that's masking some of the decrease in flow. We're actually, our revenues are going up, not going up as much as they should because of the flow decrease. So we have 44% of our meters are not registering flow. They do pay, everybody pays the minimum. If you don't pay the minimum, don't see us, you're in trouble. But, and the no free water, that is, we are not allowed, and it's a caveat put in by the bonding agencies, whoever loans the money. They don't want you giving away the money, they want to have the revenues to pay the bonds back.
Right.
And so what they do is they say, no free meter, but that means they don't want you giving away to churches, they don't want you giving away to your own buildings, your own parks. We pay water bills on our own properties as much as anybody else. We cannot set up an account and say, this is a free account. Now, we have other reasons why that is not generating as much as it should, but there's a difference in no free water versus.
Well, the free water came up in commission meetings where, as I said, people would come to us and ask us could we give them some kind of a break. I think we did make an arrangement so that there be some kind of a payment schedule.
If you have an excessive leak, we've had some people as much as, as a matter of fact, it was in the note. Guy had a water bill of $6,000 in 1 quarter.
That was his first water bill. That was his very first one.
Well, that's good, but he got a break for that from the commission. Because we then averaged the next 3 quarters, and we then backtracked and evened out the first quarter from that. But that's, again, still not free water.
Yeah.
That he has an account, he's going to pay. There was a situation that was beyond his control, he hadn't recognized it. But that's not that prohibition.
Right, so that, now, the fact that we have so many meters that are not operating, is there a plan in place so that we can bring those meters online?
Oh, yeah, that's the whole meter replacement program.
That was my question.
That's $800,000 of borrowing to replace all the meters
And
and install a radio read system. Everybody will be active. And I thought the question you might ask, which is one we haven't tackled yet, what are we going to do with those people who, the 44, who've been getting only a minimum, in some cases for years and years and years, when all of a sudden they get a real water bill?
yeah,
And, it's the opposite of, I must have a leak, what happened? No, you're actually paying what you should.
I got it.
Yeah. That's going to be a PR problem.
Just another quick, just for, County Commissioner Don Dempsey. I had a call about the fact that the county was going to cut back on the arts programs. And I called Don about it and said, well, the deal was that they could not get enough people to sit on the committee. There was a line item for it, so they said if nobody's on the committee, then why do you have a line item? So now that's countywide. So I guess one of the things that we would also have to contend with, or may have to contend with, is getting people to show up at one of these committees, if it's an arts committee or whatever. So I think that's another outreach that we need to reach out to the community who don't know what's going on in City Hall, don't know what's going on in the city. And so that the outreach should be also considered to be able to reach into churches or finding some other vehicle other than putting it on that board. Because I have people all the time say, I didn't know what was happening. So that's just that last thing. No, I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thank you, mine won't be long. Might I suggest that Zach speak with the Villa, maybe before the budget goes through, have a little sit down with them over at their community center during the day, and that would knock a whole bunch of questions out the door.
I don't really want to put him into having to attend another meeting for a single group of people. I don't want to give them overly special treatment. They're welcome to come to the meetings, and the meetings are online, and they do have representation just like everybody else. I don't particularly want to require him to go to another meeting. If it would be helpful, if the bills did request something like that, we might could print something out and send staff with a budget to one of their meetings. They have, I think, monthly meetings where they go through things like that. We might could supply some information that way if they requested it. I'd certainly be willing to listen to an idea there, but I don't want to commit our finance director to that. Personally, what do y'all think?
You're spending money to do it, what's it gonna cost, and where are we gonna stop? You have, like, you live there, and so you're more connected to the village than I was. But many times over the years and stuff, you have to come in anytime you want, invite me, or explain what you like, and it was always open, and through the years, I think a call or two, but there was never any outreach from anybody for me to come in and come on or anything like that. So maybe I should take it upon myself just to do it, because you're there. Hopefully, they'll be a little bit better represented.
I was talking about for this budget, maybe one of our elected officials that are currently sitting can help on those lines.
I'm happy to go do that, if that's what they can.
Well, let me check up there and see, possibly, we can come up with an old variance, you've got people out there who work in the city that may have a copy of that kind of report, so you have to hand it over, get approval. My biggest concern, and I think I missed out on, was stormwater, so I guess I'll talk about that next.
Well, thank you.
Well, thank you. Do you, Mr. Finance Director, need any additional information from us before we? Okay. You have 10 minutes. No, I'm just kidding.
I just want to get final kind of circle back to the Parks and Rec director. if there's a direction to incorporate that, and also want to get a feel for, you said 75,000 ballpark, that was the salary?
Yeah, I said a brief window in discussion earlier was anywhere from 60,
Yeah.
starting right out of school, to 75,000 with 10 years of experience, something like that. That was ballpark, that wasn't based on any surveys.
Yeah, so main question then is on the revenue side, and talk about what will this position help you generate? It's easy to, the directions there, which I got the sense there was that consensus. It's easy to add the, here's a position, you all the expense in the budget, but on the revenue side, is there, do we want to budget for any revenue and say we think this person's gonna pay for half of the salary, or just leave it at zero and say, let's assume worst case scenario and see where we're at? I mean, I think there'll be a lot of discussion, because adding an officer, adding this position will probably be a deficit without that revenue. We just want to get a feel for what would be the best level of information to help start that discussion.
I think a 3-year timeframe for, ratcheting in, if we started at, let's use number 60, because it's the math is easy. We started with the 20,000 revenue the first year, 40 the second, and 60 the third. As far as budgeting goes, I think that would be a reasonable budgeting thing. Budgeting is just an educated guess, that's all it ever is. So I think that would be a reasonable place to start. We can put the numbers in the budget. We can continue the discussion next time, because we're not voting on them now. It'll just give us numbers to look at. And you can show us how negatively or positively that has affected the budget.
Can you tell us the exact dollar amount that is budgeted for the public works director position on this budget? I can guess based off the one, but.
So yeah, it currently would just be based off of that, which would be, I think, the 65,000 we had there last year, index 5%, so obviously. And it's a part or two where I kind of figured let's go with it in total, as there's been shifts in positions where you have different levels, different experience and vacancies, there's so many moving pieces. That was part of why I figured, hey, for the full workforce, here's where we were last year, and then let's just work based off of that. And as we have more clarity on public works director and otherwise, I think it would be able to plug those in and make any bigger adjustments and say, hey, we're down a person, the salaries are higher, it's more in total, or it's less, whatever the case may be.
I think we might need a budget higher for that line item.
Yeah.
We probably will, but you'll know that, you'll know more about that before the next meeting. You want to just kind of by consensus give him the ability to, when he comes back with the next meeting, with the next budget, at the next actual meeting where we're presenting the budget, he'll have the numbers. We can't get to him tonight, but he'll have the numbers before that meeting.
Okay, so I guess I misunderstood. I thought the number has to be higher and then we come lower, but it can't be higher.
That's true on some things. That's particularly true on taxes. You can start high or roll back rates, things like, or not roll back, but millage rates. You can start here and never go up, but you can come down. That's where that is most of it comes into effect. It's really not on line items within the budget. Is that right?
Yeah, the village is the one where that's, you set a ceiling, you can't go beyond that. Everything else from the individual levels, that's all just gets worked through. So the COLA, we're assuming 5. If at some point said, hey, you know what, all these indexes are higher, let's do 6. There's nothing prohibiting that. It's just the millage, which kind of then becomes the revenue cap. You say, we have so much money, what are we going to do with it?
Okay.
What we do with it? Yeah, just all that doesn't really happen. What do we do with it? That's totally.
Good?
I'm good.
Anybody else? Any commissioners or staff have anything they want to do in the remainder of the budget workshop? Hearing none, I'll, without further ado, I'll adjourn this meeting. And if we could take at least a 10-minute recess, let's shoot, let's say 15 at 6:10. Let's start the next meeting.
Right.